This is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting June the 22nd, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. Over the course of the week, I completed the work on my second Oracle card deck, which I believe I alluded to last week. So now the images have been sent to the printer and it is now in production. So I'm in this state of, it's a blend of excitement and anticipation. But I thought for this week, I would work with my first Oracle card deck. So the deck of choice is going to be the Oracle of Himm by yours truly. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and see what the Oracle of Himm wants to share with us about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And just as I do every week with these general readings, I'm focusing on my intention that the information, the insight, any guidance or advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial regarding the upcoming week come through the cards. I'm feeling one more time will be good. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And even though I'm using my own personal deck, I'm still going to be working with a line of 5. So I'm looking for 5 cards in a fan that are getting my attention. Alright, so I have the 5 cards selected. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the remainder of the deck and move that to one side. And now normally, at this point, I would arrange the cards in a line, but I was feeling like I want to do something just slightly different with the layout. So I'm going to take the cards in the order that they were selected. Card 1 is going to go here. Card 2 just a little bit above that. Card 3 at the top. Card 4 on the right side of that going back down, and then card 5 at the bottom. Alright, so that is the formation. And the way I'm going to read these cards is that I'm going to start with card 3 at the top, and that's going to be the central issue or focus, and then the cards on each side of card 3 are going to be perhaps energies or other information that's going to give us more details regarding the card in the middle. So remember, card 3 is the central issue or focus. So the focus for the week ahead is the Miracle card. Okay, so Miracle is a card for me that can talk about a shift in perception. So the focus for the week ahead is how can we think differently about the experiences that we are involved in or that we are observing, because we can take on 2 roles when it comes to experiences. Either we are the participant, which means that we have a direct role or we're directly involved in it, or that we are the spectator, which means that we are observing the experiences of other people, and we are either in our thoughts or our words weighing in on what we see, right? So whether you are the participant or the spectator, this card is asking you to consider how can you shift your perception either about what you are seeing, hearing, or experiencing. And the reason for that is because I get that definition from A Course in Miracles, which defines a miracle as a shift in perception. Here's a side note which I mentioned in the video where I talked about how I created the cards. When I first saw this image, it was like this, and I'm about to come into another meaning as I'm doing this. Is giving me something else to say. It was originally like this, and when I looked at it, the guidance that I got was to shift the orientation or change the orientation of the card, which then it became like that, right? So it's about a change in our orientation, right? So it's about how can we change our view, our perception, the way we are seeing something, right? For me, I'm looking at the cards. When I do that, one way that we can look at things is portrait, right? And then we shift it to landscape. So that's what's coming to me in my mind. But that's just a way of maybe widening our perspective, right? When you go landscape, it's a way of widening the perspective, right? Now, the other thing here that I'm seeing when I went like this, and I talked about this, I originally found this picture under the word rainbow. And so it just reminds me that this is the month of June and this is Pride Month. For those in the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning community, right? This is Pride Month, right? So acknowledging all of those brothers and sisters in those communities, right? To be proud of who you are. But that could also be a wider message to be proud about who you are. And that may be where we need to have a shift in perception. Maybe some of us need to see ourselves in a different light, right? And this is an angel deck for me. So the colors can represent not just the colors in the pride flag, but also the colors of the angels, right? So it's about seeing yourself in a different light, because when the angels first came to me, they came to me in a dream, and they each were beams of light, but beams of light of different colors, right? And so maybe as I'm talking out loud, I love doing these readings where I'm talking out loud because other thoughts come in. So it's about maybe being proud of all the different colors that make up who you are. And then the last thing I will say, well, actually, two last things I will say about the Miracle card. The Miracle card is also, for me, a divine intervention card, right? So this card could be about paying attention to the ways that the divine is acting on your behalf this week, right? And you'll notice it in ways, because it will be ways beyond your thinking or doing, especially, right? Whatever happens will be out of your hands. It's something that you could not have done on your own, right? So that's another way of looking at this card. And then finally, the last thing I was about to say, this could be a week where we're being asked to kind of learn how to go with the flow, right? I look at the imagery and it makes me think of liquid that is flowing. So it could just be a matter of how can you go with the flow, which means how can you be more flexible? How can you be more adaptable, right? Especially when situations change. And if you're having trouble dealing with being adaptable and dealing with change, I confess, I used to have a story around change. I used to have a belief that when change happened in my life, I was going to be on the losing end of that, right? And so for me, I had to have a shift in my perception about change in and of itself, right? So I'm offering that because I may not be the only one who's either had a story about change or has a story about change and how you are affected and impacted in the negative, challenging sense when change arrives at your doorstep, right? So this could be the week where you're being invited through the process of things changing, how to be more flexible and adaptable, right? So that is the Miracle card. So now let's take a look at surrounding cards. Starting with the card on the far left, we have Dragonfly. Yeah, so here's another card for me that talks about change, but it talks about change being a transformative process. So it could just be a matter of paying attention to change, you being transformed in a major way by change, especially if we go back to Miracle, and Miracle talking about, divine intervention, right? It could also be, too, if we go back to how I defined Miracle, a shift in perception, that could be the thing that transforms not just you as a person, but transforms your life, right? The dragonfly has these alchemical and magical symbols, right? So it could just be a matter of you, through the process of this transformative experience, getting to see the magic of either life or the divine or the universe, or however you want to language that, but you just get to see the magic at work, right? Or that you're getting more in touch with your own magic. Remember, I talked about being more proud of who we are, and maybe proud of all the colors that make up who we are, right? So it could just be you're getting more in touch with the magic that resides within you, or you're seeing that you are quite the magical person, right? And getting more in touch with that. The last thing I will say about piece of advice, when the Dragonfly card comes up, it talks about light, right? And so the advice here could be, how can you lighten up? We're in times that are really challenging, and so you may be feeling a sense of heaviness or weariness around what's going on. Remember, I talked about with Miracle about this taking on the role of being the spectator, right? And so maybe you're seeing what's going on and you're just feeling a sense of heaviness, right? And so the Dragonfly card is asking you, how can you lighten up? What are the activities that you could engage in that would lighten you up, right? And I will say this, going back to the Miracle card, looking at the imagery, right? The light is over a darkened background, right? And so it could just be a matter of, seeing more of the light that's taking place in the world rather than focusing on the quote-unquote darkness that's taking place, right? Okay, so that's the Dragonfly card. The biggest thing I will say about the Dragonfly card, it's about, change, transformation, it's about illumination, but in and of itself, the chief message is about finding ways to lighten up. Okay. Now, I will say this also. For me, the Dragonfly card is in the deck because I have this knack, and it could be the magic of the universe at work, but I have this knack for drawing dragonflies to me. It started out where I would draw just one. I would see one in my path, but then I would see like groups of them, like in pairs or in trios, just when I was out and about. And as I'm looking out the window, I just saw a dragonfly go by. You can't make this stuff up. So that's for me to say to you, pay attention if dragonflies are coming up. And if you see a dragonfly in your path, remember, it's talking about change, transformation, illumination, but also it may be a reminder about lightening up, Okay, so now let's move on to the card in between the two. And here we have Clairvoyance. Oh, this is one of my favorite cards in the deck. Okay, so the obvious nod about Clairvoyance is that maybe if we talk about the magic of Dragonfly, right, and maybe more about, who you are with the Miracle card and embracing an aspect of who you are, the Clairvoyance could just be that you possess the ability of second sight, which means that you see images in your head, mental imagery, right? And if you're no stranger to these weekly videos, you know that you will hear me say that I'm seeing something in my head, right? I'm seeing a card from a deck. If I'm riffing on a card on the table, I may see a variation of that same card in a different deck to get me to say a particular message, right? So with that in mind, again, the chief message of this card could be, you honoring your gift or talent of second sight. And if that's the case, if that resonates with you, how can you nurture that? How can you develop that further, right? If you are seeing visions, then the image of a TV set is a pun for tell of vision. It could be a matter of who do you need to communicate what you are seeing with or to, right? So it's the obvious meaning of clairvoyance. Now, the TV is also a pun for what we are viewing. Remember, I talked with the Miracle card about either choosing to be a participant or a spectator, right? The clairvoyance card would suggest on some level we need to give some attention to what it is that we are viewing, what it is that we are watching, what it is that we are observing, right? And it reminds me of the message that I talked about in last week's Kipper card reading with the social media card. Here we have the same thing because the TV broadcasts messages, broadcasts images that we tune into, right? That we are receiving, if you go with the idea that the TV is all about reception. So it could just be a matter of what are the messages that you are tuning into? What messages are you listening to, right? And again, I will talk about it like I talked about last week. The TV is also a visual symbol for the media, right? So if you are seeing or observing the quote unquote darkness in the world, and I talked about that a little bit last week, it's being reinforced here this week. How can you shift the channel? It may be a matter of changing the channel, either in a literal sense or in the metaphorical sense, into something that may be more light, right? So I'm seeing this is a matter of paying attention to what it is that we are tuning into this week in terms of broadcast messages, right? Especially those coming from the media. And I will say this, the TV has a number of channels. So we're not just talking about the television set, what you are watching on an actual TV, right? We're talking about all the channels in which media is asking you to tune into its messages. And so that is the internet, that is the radio, that is the TV. Messages are broadcast in a number of ways in this day and age, right? And then the last thing I will say is that the background, when I designed this card, is an old TV testing pattern, right? So there's something about observing your patterns this week, right? If we're talking about the Dragonfly card being about change and a transformative experience for you as an individual, sometimes a shift in perception, miracle, happens when we become more aware of our patterns. And so you may have an experience this week that gets you to really observe your patterns. And when I talk about that, the TV is also about your conditioning and your programming. You know, through prior experiences, we have all been conditioned and programmed to react and respond in certain ways to certain experiences. So you may be up close and personal to your patterns this week, and then you get to ask yourself the question, if you're not liking what you're seeing, what are you willing to do to change? Because as I wrap up with clairvoyance, the remote is in your hands. Okay, so now let's move on to the other side of miracle. And here we have infinite intelligence. Oh my gosh, you can't make this stuff up. So the infinite intelligence card in my deck is the divine card, right? And so when I say divine, it can be God, goddess, whatever you language that for yourself, right? Because I'm a big believer in that the divine doesn't get hung up on names. We get hung up on the names as people about what we call the divine, but the divine itself does not get hung up on the names, right? So that's the first thing. It could just be a matter of there may be something that gets you following the order of the cards. If you're seeking divine intervention, then this would be the divine stepping in to intervene on your behalf, right? So there's that. I also see the infinite intelligence card as technology. I see this as systems. I see this as programs. And so I love the fact that it's on the opposite side of clairvoyance, and it kind of just piggybacks on what I was just saying about, you know, the media and all its distribution channels and how it's broadcasting certain kinds of messages. And I will say there's certain kinds of messages with a particular slant. So when you're receiving these messages, ask yourself the question, what's the slant? What's the underlying agenda to the message that I'm being asked to view, I'm being asked to listen to, I'm being asked to receive? To me, all media has some kind of agenda, has some kind of slant. And I will say this, has some kind of bias. And so it's getting you to say, am I being asked to tune into or adopt a certain slant, bias, or agenda? But the infinite intelligence card piggybacks on this card in that regard because it represents technology. So that's what I will say about the infinite intelligence card. And it could just be, too, if we go with the idea, I thought I was done, but if we go with the idea that we're talking about a change or a transformative experience, a shift in perception, then this card is about expansion. If you look at the image, there's a nucleus here and it radiates out, right? So this could just be a matter of, you know, mental awareness, an expansion of mind. One of my other names for God is divine mind, or the one mind, or the universal mind, right? And what I learned as a Christian metaphysician is that each of us is an expression or an idea in divine mind, right? So it could just be a matter of, first off, a shift in perception may be you tapping into divine mind and having a different idea about what it is that you are experiencing in this physical world, right? And that idea expands your mental awareness. So there's that. The other thing here is if you tune into the idea that you are an expression in divine mind, that in and of itself could be something that starts the process of seeing yourself, experiencing yourself differently. Yeah? Okay. Because the imagery has ones and zeros. So the one is a number of the individual, right? The one in numerology for me represents the origin, the starting point, right? The beginning of something. So it could be that as an individual, you have a more enlightened view or way of thinking about an experience because you've traced it back to its origin, to its starting point, right? In order to move beyond it. So that's what I'm seeing with the Infinite Intelligence card. And so now the last card rounding out this week's reading is, I love this. Okay, so no surprise. So here we have the intuitive card, and you can clearly see by the image on the card that it is me, right? So, so I'm digging this because, as it, it represents me imagery wise. Then it's a particular nod for myself as the reader. So I'm paying more attention to this reading because I'm seeing myself on the table. But for those of you who are not me, right? Because I'm an individual, right? I'm not the collective. The intuitive card represents, tapping more into your intuition. And I love the fact that on the image, my third eye is open, right? So here we have a nod back to the clairvoyance card, right? I'm going to say this is a week where we are being asked to pay attention to how we see things and going beyond the physical, right? In the image, my eyes are closed, right? So it reminds me of that line in scripture. And remember, I'm a Christian metaphysician, so I'm quoting Christian scripture. But if you're not following that path, that is okay, right? Because I believe that all paths lead to God. That is just my particular belief. And Marianne Williamson, since I talked about A Course in Miracles, I heard her once say that there are many different doors to the divine, and you just choose your door, right? So I'm just talking about the door that I have chosen, but it is not the only door. It is not the true door, the right door, the only door. It is the door that works for me, right? Because that's the challenge that I have with people who adopt a particular path, that they believe that their path is the right and perfect path for everyone involved. I don't believe that. I believe that we all get to choose the door that we're going to walk through because they all lead back to God, right? Infinite intelligence, right? If everything is of God, then every door is of God. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox there. But that is my particular belief. So, but again, so I'm talking about Christian scripture. There's a line where it says, do not judge by appearances, right? So the eyes being closed, we're not looking at what's going on the way that others see it in the physical world, right? Or the way that we're being told to look at it. Again, messages being broadcast, right? We're sometimes being told to look at this experience this particular way, right? I'm riffing on the media again, right? So closing your eyes, not seeing it the way everyone else is seeing it, right? You're tuning in and you're allowing spirit, the spirit of your understanding, the spirit as you have defined it, to enlighten you, to inform you about what you're seeing and possibly, seeing it in a different light, seeing it in a different way, right? So that's what I'm thinking the message is really is about. What are we seeing, and can we see it a different way? Would we be willing to see it a different way? Would we be willing to see it in a different light? So there is that. I think that is the overall message, regardless of your spiritual path or, going with the idea that the third eye is open, whether or not you believe in psychic ability, whether you believe in clairvoyance, those kinds of things. I think that's the chief message. But if you are a more spiritually minded person, then of course, then this is about tapping into your intuition, and also too, the possible activation of your brow or third eye chakra, right? And it could also be for some people about the caring of your third eye or your brow chakra, because the other message of this card for me can be about the decalcification of your pineal gland, right? So one of the things, or a few of the things that I do in this regard, if you're wanting to work to develop your second sight more deeply or more fully, the first thing you could do is you could ask to remove any and all blocks to your seeing. You may have, I talked about conditioning and programming, you may have at some point in your past asked for that to be shut off because of something either that you saw or the fear of what you might see, right? And so if you're wanting to maybe explore that, or open that back up or activate that, the first thing you might want to do is consider if you've put a block based on something you experienced in the past or what you thought you might see, right? So you could ask for that block to be removed, right? And you could affirm that it is safe for me to see, right? So that would be your affirmation. It is safe for me to see. Since this is an angel card deck, you could also work with Archangel Haniel, who is the angel who assists us with, our psychic gifts, talents, and abilities. So you could work with her energy. And I'm saying her because, again, as people, we have a need to classify things, right? Angels, generally speaking, don't have a gender, right? They may have an energy that we define as either masculine or feminine, right? But we as people sometimes need to label things in order to make sense of it or to wrap our heads around it, right? So Archangel Haniel, for me, has a more feminine type energy. So I describe Haniel as her or she, right? So you could work with Haniel. You could also work with Archangel Raphael. Archangel Raphael works closely with the angels of clairvoyance. And so if there is a block there, you could call upon Archangel Raphael to help heal the block, right? So there's that. You could also work with Archangel Raziel, who helps us with our metaphysical talents, gifts, and abilities, right? So those three angels around that. Oh, and I was talking about, the idea about decalcifying your pineal gland. So some of the things that I have chosen to do, and you could explore this because there are probably more suggestions than the ones that I currently adopt. But the first thing that I did was that I stopped using toothpaste that has fluoride in it. I went fluoride free with my toothpaste. So you could find ways to eliminate your fluoride intake, because that can create calcification on your pineal gland. The other thing I did, of course, is, I started drinking more of water. And again, that would be a place where you could, find water that is fluoride free in particular, or that you could add lemon to your water, right? But if you increase your water intake, that would be helpful. And then the last thing that I did, and I think was a huge game changer for me, was that I started taking ashwagandha on a regular basis. I take it every day. And I think that is the thing that really, really helped decalcify my pineal gland and actually helped open up this faculty or ability, right? So I'm just putting those out there. You could explore those and maybe some other options if you're feeling like you have a block with seeing, if you want to see more. And the reason why I started the decalcification is that I saw someone on YouTube talk about it, and I thought, because I work with my intuition on a regular basis with my clients, I thought I would do my due diligence to make sure that this particular faculty is as clear as possible at all times, right? So again, the intuitive card would just be a matter of, going with your intuition, tapping into your intuition more. The fact that the individual on the card, his eyes are closed, could just be a matter of seeing beyond the physical, right? So maybe not judging things based on what you see, but taking a step back, tuning in and asking yourself, what is really going on here? What is this situation really informing me about? And so on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook reading here. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and I'm so grateful and thankful that you have chosen to give me your time and tune in to this week's reading and share this space with me. And I look forward to sharing this same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I am hoping that you are having the best day possible, and I'm hoping that you are having the best week possible. Take care.